Hello there, welcome back to another show. Today I'm going to talk about The Right Stuff, which is the adaptation by Phillip Kaufman of the Tom Wolfe story of the Mercury programme. That also goes all the way back to the breaking the sound barrier. So it covers quite a distance of time. I mean, it's like from the test pilots from the 40s and 50s all the way up to the late 50s, early 60s with the space programme. So it's got a lot to cover, and it is a epic film. It's also a wonderful film. This is one of those films for me, like Dark Star or 2001 or the space program. I love space films, but this is one of the peak ones where it's like there's so much imagination show beyond what the budget can allow sometimes in the case of Dark Star, that it's just wonderful. And this one just has that whole sense of this feeling of showing a world that's past and showing a time where people are striving to do something that was felt fairly impossible. And there's a lot of backing by American government money, but also propaganda. They had the Cold War going on, and also human foibles of insanity, the insanity of the time, the insanity of the politics of the time, the insanity of the showboating that comes with America, especially in that time when America and Russia were both trying to showboat against each other. So the film has that wonderful sense of absurdity of human beings mixed with the kind of adventurous element of humanity as well. That's I try to do something that's near impossible, that is very dangerous and could get you killed. And it's just got that kind of wonderful juxtaposition of these two elements that are always running through it, but never forgets just how dangerous what they're doing is and how difficult it is. It's always there, and it tends to leave the comedy to the politicians and their aspirations, as well as the human foibles of people, and how ridiculous ego can make someone. So it starts off with Sam Shepard as Chuck Yeager, who's the test pilot. He's the guy who works in a government contract. He's not like a top level pilot in the views of the army. He's just a test pilot. He's paid a weekly wage. That's it. That's all he gets. And he's at Edwards Air Force Base as they try to break the sound barrier. And no one things can be broken. They call it the demon in the sky. There's just something that can't be broken. And to him it can be broken. So after a crash that's killed somebody, they're trying to find someone else who's got the guts to go do it. And someone's trying to up the price to try and get as much money as they can for this very dangerous task, and the Navy said no, we can't afford that, so they go to Yeager, who is just a test pilot they can just pay his normal wage to. So he goes up, even though he's hurt his ribs riding his horse at that time. He fakes it so no. And in an amazing sequence, he breaks the sound barrier. He just he's got the kind of calmness that you need, but it's also as he's working with the technicians, because it is a technological situation where it's like, yeah, this is something that very few people can do, and you need a lot of experts to try and make it work. So the film doesn't forget the fact that it's not just the guys or the pilots, it's also the technicians who are building these planes. So as the film then has a jump to the mid-50s after Yeager's broken the sound barrier. And essentially what's happened since then is Yeager's become the god of the Edwards Air Force Base. He's the guy that whenever anyone beats one of his records for this high speed, he goes up and breaks it back to his own, for himself. He's always the one who's leading the charge for speed in the airplanes. He's the guy, really, and he's the epitome of the right stuff. You know, someone who can go up, do something almost impossible, and then not talk about it much. No one talks about it stuff much. They're all trying to be Jaeger. And into this program comes Gus Grissom and Gordo Cooper, who are played by Fred Willard and Dennis Quaid, who are the two young test pilots who go to Edwards Air Force Base to make a name for themselves, and then find out that there's a pecking order, and they are way at the bottom of it, and they're never going to get higher with Jaeger still, functional and being the guy that everyone wants to, compete with. It's like, it's Jaeger then as the rest of you. And you're never going to win in that battle with Jaeger for supremacy of the Edwards Air Force Base. So, when the astronaut program starts up, because the Russians have launched a rocket that's made it up, America gets serious, then we need to put an American in space. And we're going to, we're going to invest in this heavily. So they say we're going to go to the Navy, we're going to go to everybody, any pilots who are really good, and we're going to bring them together and test them. And we're going to test them really radically. Now, this creates a sequence that's been heavily parodied and heavily influenced by almost any film that takes place in any film that has anything to do with airplanes or training has been influenced by this sequence. This is the great training sequence of the 80s. That, like, the Armageddon, just all out, just went, okay, we're just going to do the right stuff, a comedy version of the right stuff. Like, anyone does this, does the right stuff. Because there is a mix of humour and also the seriousness of the idea is all these tests actually have a meaning. They may feel absurd, but actually when you look at what they're doing, they actually do have a meaning. It's just when you're doing the test, you feel stupid. And the whole idea is that they're going to test how good these pilots actually are, and like we're dealing with pressure, dealing with breathing, dealing with isolation, because no one knows how long they might be up in space, and no one knows. You need people who can deal with it, not freak out, because it's different from flying airplane craft. So you get a sequence where everyone's winnowed down to the Mercury 7, who are going to be the guys in the space program, and so you introduce to certain other characters at that point. You have John Glenn, played by Ed Harris. You've got Alan, I can't remember the name, played by Scott Glenn, who's a standout. You've got Lance Henriksen as Wally Shiver, who's based in the background. You have a sense that some of his stuff got cut. There's another guy who's a pal of John Glenn who doesn't really make an impression. But essentially, you get the Mercury 7. These are the guys who are going to... There's another guy who was pals with Grissom and Cooper at the test pilot program as well. So these are the best of the best who are chosen to be the test pilots for... They're going from the test pilots and natural pilots to being the Mercury 7 who are going to go up into space. And then from then on, you're showing you the situation of how this thing is created, which means a lot more training, a lot more testing, and a lot more tests with rockets that blow up on the pad. And it's like, okay, is this safe, like, at all? I mean, where the Russians are doing well, Russians have sent a monkey into space at some point, and the Americans are getting more and more frustrated because there's a sense that they're going to send a monkey into space first before them, which makes their job look really absurd. So the film has this whole sense of, yeah, what they're doing is really brave, but it's also a monkey's job, and it is absurd. And the whole absurdity of life and of this ambition is always played up, as well as the bravery of these guys who are actually doing something that's really difficult. So you get both of these in juxtaposition. But every so often you go back to Sam Shepard as Chuck Yeager, who's been forgotten. He's a guy who broke the sound bar, but that record's now well in the past. No one cares. They're all talking about space now. But the guys who are the Mercury pilots, they remember him. They remember him being like their guy, their god, the guy they try to live up to. So the sense of the right stuff is going through Yeager to these guys, even though these guys are doing something that's in some ways far less technical and far more absurd and far less in their control. But as the film goes on, they actually start to be more focused with the guys creating the rocket, saying, look, we need this, we need that, because if it's an emergency we need to take control. And there's a sense of them slowly developing the skills to deal with the technicians, to say, we're not just going to be your play toy, we're going to be pilots if needed. And slowly you see the creation of NASA, the mix of the technocrats and the pilots who have to actually be able to do stuff and actually have to take some control. So if you're like me, someone who loves the space program and loves all of that stuff, it's quite wonderful to watch this thing taking place, the creation of NASA, essentially, out of basically German scientists who came from the World War II, American scientists, and these all American guys who are going to be the top people. And of course, there's a crushing thing of the Russians get the first man in space, but then they start to do their own records, like the longest man going around the world repeatedly and things like that. So they start to find their own path. So you end up getting this idea that Shepard's the first one up, and he's a great hero at the start. So he's Alan Shepard, the character Scott Glenn plays. But by the end of it, when John Glenn has done it, it's like he's almost forgotten, just the way Yeager was forgotten. The idea of the American public is fickle. You've got Gus Grissom's disastrous one, where essentially there's a malfunction in the capsule, and the capsule sinks, and he almost dies. And they blame him for it, even though he says it wasn't me, there was nothing loose, there was a malfunction. Which later on, NASA said that was probably what happened. It was probably because it was like you're shooting stuff into space and coming back down. And it's like, you're still testing stuff out at that point. And it's like, yeah, there was a malfunction. They sorted it out, they figured it out. But Grissom's kind of the tragic character, because later on in NASA, he dies during a fire in one of the later capsules. So he never gets the luck of an astronaut. But what you get in the film is this sense of trying something very difficult, but also just in the sense of humour, what people are actually like, and how ridiculous a lot of the Cold War stuff was, but how scary it was at the same time. And also a sense of how fickle America could be about heroes. They want heroes, but they'll forget about them pretty quickly. But then it's like, it's almost like heroic is almost like you have to do it for yourself and actually learn to basically be self-sufficient about what you did and be part of a team. It's not just about you, but it's also you have done an achievement. It doesn't matter if people remember or not. You did that thing that was very difficult. And even Yeager gives the astronauts respect. Like he's saying, like, well, monkeys can't go up and know they might die. The thing might explode on them at any moment. He goes, it does take a lot to be able to do that. It's a certain kind of man who can do that, and most men can't. So there's a sense of they are progressing the right stuff, it's just in a different way. But still, they're going to get mocked because they're in less control as they would be as a test pilot. And maybe these test pilots aren't as good as Yeager was. But they're still carrying on the tradition to some other field, some other avenue that's still out there, that's still another terrain that has been conquered. Which is the whole idea, is right stuff about conquering something that has been conquered in different ways. So this is a wonderful film, beautifully shot by Kaufman and Caleb Deschanel. But a lot of it is that how Kaufman moves the camera to keep everything lifelike, and because it looks beautiful, but also Kaufman, it's just the special effects a certain way, which obviously influenced Christopher Nolan when he did Interstellar, the idea of making it more practical rather than very slick, and also the idea of having just have a sense of humour with the framing without making it, you know, jokey. Just this idea of having, like, taking what the cliches are and having a little bit of mockery with them, but without going too far, keeping the camera loose but not too loose, so you've got a formalism to it, so you feel it is a tradition of American film, but also there's a kind of thing saying some of this is absurd, some of this is silly. Just the way he directs it is wonderful. It is probably his best film. It just, there's this wonderful feel to it. And also the cast is perfect. The casting all the way down is perfect. You have Sam Shepard Yeager, who just epitomises this guy who's enigmatic, and you can't quite get what he is. He is a walking legend, and Shepard knows to give enough humanity, but don't explain everything. Then you have, like, Dennis Quaid and Fred Willard as a duo, a comedy duo within the film, even though, because they're the guys that are always aspiring and always feeling that they're coming up short. They're the guys who always feel like they're not the respected people in the room, and that never really goes away. Even though, like, Cooper's the guy who's always the big mouth, but there is a kind of other side to him, as he was like hero worshipping these other guys at the same time. You get Ed Harris and Scott Glenn, not as John Glenn, who's just this kind of all-American guy, which is funny when you see Ed Harris in other films where he's just much gruffer. He was playing the guy he normally doesn't get to play. He normally gets to play the realistic guy, and this one he's playing the guy who's like the Tom Cruise kind of character. You have Scott Glenn as Alan Shepard, who's like the much more of the everyman kind of character, who has a weird sense of humour that doesn't always go down well with the kind of he does a Mexican character that annoys people in the Mexican community, and so they just tell him off for it. But he's also the guy who kind of sees the time passing and does it with grace. He understands things move on. He's probably closest to Yeager of any of the pilots. He's the one who kind of understands Yeager in a way that the other pilots probably don't in the same way. Even though he didn't do the test piloting thing, he was just a pilot on the ocean for the Navy. He's one of the best pilots in this sense of he's kind of much more of the elite class of pilot. Like, the probably reason why he went up first is because he was like the best pilot. So you get all these characters, plus you get the supporting characters. You have Harry Shearer and Jeff Goldblum as the guys who are like going to recruit everybody, and they're a comedy duo that they're just absurd. They don't quite know anything. They're passing through history and not quite getting it. You have Pamela Reed as Cooper's wife, who's exasperated by him all the time because he is such a show-off, and she leaves him a few times and she has to put up with him. And you've got maybe Joe Deschanel, who's the wife of the cinematographer, playing John Glenn's wife, who has a stutter, and he's protecting her from things like this. And she's some wonderful stuff, wonderful performances. There's just lots of actors who just come through as just been terrific. Even the support part, you've got Lance Henriksen in a small part. And this was around about the time he was starting to do Terminator stuff and things. So he's very done Dog Day Afternoon, so he was like a supporting actor who'd been in a bunch of stuff. So the cast is this, like, you've got Scott Wilson, a small part as well, and he'd really done things like the Ninth Configuration. So you've got great actors in small parts. It's that good. So this film is just wonderful. The guy playing LBJ, whose name I can't, Donald Wolfe or something, he was in The Thing as well. He also appeared in Bonfire of Vantage, the other Tom Wolfe adaptation that was not as good. I'll be covering that soon. So there's just a great cast, a terrific film. This is one of my favourites. It's one of those films I watch just to kind of re-engage in cinema if I'm down about films. because I know this one's going to cheer me up. It's kind of in there with like things like Assault on Precinct 13, you know, that kind of thing where every time you can put a movie on that will bring you back up if you're feeling really kind of, oh, I've seen too many crap movies. It just reminds you how great movies can be. So this one's beautiful. This one is just wonderful. So I urge you to go see it if you've never seen it. Try and see it as a big a screen as possible, because the effects are old fashioned, but they worked wonderfully, and some of the flying sequences are just stunning. And also just the atmosphere of it, you get a lot more if you see it on a bigger screen. So if you try and see it on a bigger screen. So this one's great. Go watch it. It's amazing. Right, bye for now.